Hello and once again, welcome to another episode of the Growing Guelph podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jordan Slockett. This week on the podcast, I am privileged to have been joined by Dominique O'Rourke. You might recognize Dominique's name from appearing on thousands of signs on many people's yards across the city because she was the Liberal candidate for our recent election. And she won that election, which is part of the reason why I wanted to sit down with Dominique to find out what she has planned, what motivates her to get involved both on the city level and now federally on behalf of Guelph. Really enjoyed this conversation with Dominique. I think she's clearly someone who is very thoughtful about serving the city, what the city needs. Looking forward to this conversation, maybe the first of many. And with that, I'll get right to my conversation with Guelph's newly elected MP, Dominique O'Rourke. They all tend to start pretty conversational, usually either mid-conversation or me just sort of saying. I'm very happy to be joined by Dominique O'Rourke on the Growing Guelph podcast today. Dominique, thanks so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
So, Dominique, could you share, well, I guess before we hop right into the questions, can you introduce yourself to our audience? Who are you and what brings you here today?
Sure. So I am Guelph's new Member of Parliament.
Congratulations on the election.
Thank you very much. And I actually just came from City Hall. I left my badge there and my computer and my phone and all those great things after serving as a city councillor for Ward 6 for 6 years, 6 and a bit. And it's just been my absolute privilege to serve Guelph. And I just think this is a next step, just a different way of serving Guelph. And so I'm really excited about that.
Would you be able to share if there's any pivotal moments or influences that inspired you to transition from community volunteerism to municipal politics and then now to this next step to be serving as Guelph's Member of Parliament?
Sure. So it's not a pivotal moment. It's a bit of a full circle moment. So I was, as a teenager, went to Forum for Young Canadians, lots of unity stuff. I was a House of Commons page in first year university. I was a parliamentary tour guide for 3 years, and then I was a parliamentary intern, where you work 5 months for a government MP and 5 months for an opposition MP, and you study other parliamentary democracies. So that led me actually to get to know the cooperators, because they were a sponsor of the internship program, and I was an intern the year of the Quebec referendum. So they were very concerned about national unity, obviously, and held a youth unity conference. And because the interns were from across Canada, we were a panel. They asked me to come back the following year, and I went as a facilitator. So that's how I got to know the cooperators. And fast forward a few years later, I was hired to come to Guelph, which is the national head office, to be their first public relations person. So it's almost a confluence of events. And my first boss at the cooperators spoke at my nomination meeting, and she said, "Help me send Dominique back to Ottawa." So I think that the service aspect has always been there. And we see it in our community. Who are the school council presidents? Who are leading climate change initiatives, right? These people that are leaning in, you find that you're able to lean in different ways at different moments in your life. So when my kids were little, it was, serving the school community. And then you look around and you say, well, I think that I could do this more broadly, or there's something in my area that's concerning me, and I think I would have skills to bring to this solution. So that's why I ran for council in 2018. And at this point, I think that I can do more for Guelph from Ottawa than I can from a council seat. So it is really about looking around and saying, how can I use my skills really to do what I've been doing all along, and that's serving whatever community I'm serving at the time.
So it sounds like your roots in Guelph kind of go pretty deep. Does the idea of, obviously you'll still be serving Guelph, but physically you'll be spending a lot of your time away in Ottawa. How does that make you feel in terms of stepping away from the city while still needing to keep it kind of front and center in your mind?
I don't know that there's actually stepping away from the city because you're home every weekend.
Okay, that's
You
fair.
are home at least a week every month. You're home through the summer and in the winter for 2 months. And you are constantly in touch with constituents and stakeholders. And so that work of Guelph never ends. We are constantly connected because we've got Zoom calls and emails. So I'll have a team here in Guelph to serve people if they have questions about their passports or EI or anything like that. We're going to be able to help people navigate because of the municipal knowledge that I bring. And I've worked as a government relations consultant, so very, very good knowledge of what government does what. So I mean, you're serving the people of Guelph. There's zero disconnect.
Talking about your roots in the city, did you grow up in Guelph, or how did you come to live here?
So I came to Guelph in 1997 to work for the Cooperators.
Okay.
I was their first ever public relations person. They had never had a PR person before. And then I became their media and government relations person. I was their national bilingual spokesperson and then ultimately their director of public affairs. And then when my kids were small, I wanted to stay home with them. My dad was self employed and my mom was a stay at home mom. So I wanted to do that and started my own business. So I've been here since 1997. I've volunteered 10 years on the Guelph Community Foundation and ended up as their chair. So the roots, I mean, I helped to write our first vital signs report. The roots are really deep now. I've lived in Guelph longer than I've lived anywhere else.
Guelph feels like home.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's unique to Guelph as a city, but there's a lot of people who get pulled into its orbit. I'm one of them. I came here for school and then moved away for a little bit, but there was always something in the back of my head that like I could go back to Guelph and settle down there. And 5 years ago I did, and now I have no interest in leaving. And it's like the longer you stay here, the more there's to love here. The more there's like you get to know the city. And I've been privileged enough to be doing this podcast, and in just like 6 months or so of doing it, I feel like it's really expanded my scope of just how much love and attention and care there is in this city. And I'm never going to run out of people to talk to on this podcast. Like every day I discover like 3 more people that I can potentially talk to, and I'm sure there's even more out there. So I feel privileged to be doing a podcast like this in a city that's just it's turning out positive, community active minded people like a factory, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give you a couple examples. When I was on the board of the Community Foundation, my friend and I co-founded Guelph's Random Act of Kindness Day. And in 6 weeks, 200 organizations said we're in. And I thought, that is just amazing, right? And all the largest employers, the school boards, the university, everybody was in, and without hesitation. So we are a perfect size for information to permeate pretty quickly. We've got a really nice size. The other example I'd give you is I worked with Guelph Police and Special Olympics Ontario on all of the community mobilization and fundraising for the Special Olympics Spring Games in 2016. And I said to Special Olympics Ontario, listen, for the opening ceremonies, we're going to have to cordon off space in the Sleeman Centre so that the families can get seats when they come from the banquet. And Special Olympics said, no, look, we do this every year. Trust me, the stadium will not be full. Well, lo and behold, the people of Guelph showed up to the opening ceremony. There were fans in stands. It was wonderful because we don't have 10 competing things like you would have in Toronto or a larger city. So when there is something happening in Guelph, people really come and support that initiative. And sometimes there's 3 or 4 things going on, but you can actually cover them off in the space of a weekend. So to me, that's really magical when that happens. And we saw it during COVID, these spontaneous groups popping up to support one another. We are also leading the country in terms of new housing for the unhoused. The collaborations are amazing. The number of supportive housing units in the last several years in Guelph, I know that people don't see them necessarily, but there's a lot of progress here. We lead on climate, climate action. So there's a lot to be proud of in Guelph. And I think part of what drives that forward is how engaged people are. New staff to the city are always amazed by how engaged people are at council meetings. So we've got lots of delegates, we've got lots of correspondence. And I think that is essential for a vibrant city. I did some work for the Canadian Index of Wellbeing, and they've got 8 domains that are important. One is democratic participation, and we've got it in spades here.
I think there's a lot of unique factors that go into making the city like why it's special, and I think one of them is just our geographic location where we're close enough to the GTA to Toronto, but we're just outside the GTA bubble, and escaping that bubble of the GTA means that people feel like a cohesive identity with their city. And I don't know, I don't want to speak for any other the cities that make up the GTA, but I think sometimes if you live in Oakville, or like I lived in Oakville, or I worked in Mississauga, there can be a sense that you're just living in a like a sleepy suburb of Toronto, and to go and do anything and to participate in the city means going to Toronto. Not true across the board. There's like cool things that all those cities individually do, but they get very wrapped up in each other because they're so close and so integrated. And Guelph is just independent enough that we benefit from being near all those cities, but we have this very strong cohesive identity as to like where Guelph begins, kind of thing. If that makes any sense.
I think you're absolutely right. It's not just that we're unique from the GTA, but we have access to the GTA. I think we're also unique from Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge.
Yeah.
And so we are this cohesive community with a lot going on, right? Very diverse economy, university, vibrant because we've got all of these students, young people, people choosing to come here, people choosing to retire here. I always ask newcomers, I knocked on thousands of doors and people say we're new to Guelph. I always ask, what made you come to Guelph? How do you like it? And we have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely do. And speaking of your legacy of contributing to the city, when you're reflecting on your tenure as city councillor, what key lessons or insights have you gained that you think will really inform your approach and priorities now that you'll be working at the federal level?
So definitely it's a continuation of what I've learned on council, 100%. I had the honor of chairing the Infrastructure Development and Environment Committee for 4 years, and I was vice chair for the 2 years prior. So, really understanding the city's infrastructure needs as we go forward. How do we make that infrastructure climate resilient? How are we greening our infrastructure so that we're emitting less GHGs? How do we have better transit and interregional transit? I mean, what are the key pieces that are going to solve some of our biggest challenges? The housing file clearly was significant on council and is a national issue. And right now, so as part of IDE, sometimes economic development was part of that, sometimes it wasn't. But I'm a big fan of economic development and advocated for some support for the agencies that support small businesses so we can attract, retain, and grow business. We can protect those jobs. We do really need a vibrant economy here, and I will be working towards that in Ottawa, definitely. And also just the affordability piece. So I spoke with lots of people in their driveway who are concerned about the cost of living. So continuing, I was on the Joint Social Services and Land Ambulance Committee from the city and the county, continuing to work towards $10 a day childcare, which does two things. It's very helpful from an affordability perspective, but also it helps women's participation in the workforce. So definitely, and in the longer term, it helps to reduce the pay equity gap. So those are all definitely on the agenda, in addition to really helping Guelph shine on the national stage in terms of our excellence in advanced manufacturing, agribusiness, and clean tech, how we can lead Canada and the world in all those three areas. So I love the economic development stuff.
Well, there's like we were saying about the things to be proud of, and I mean, anytime you want to be excited about what's coming next, just look at the like University of Guelph news page, for example, where it can. I've said this before a few times, where like bad news takes up headlines, it's flashy, but people don't write the news of the hard work and the dedication that's just ongoing every single day that so many people dedicate their time towards. But it's not headline grabbing, right? It's not headline grabbing to say like doctors continue to save lives, like food banks continue to help serve people who don't have the ability to put food in their kitchen. But all those things are constantly happening in the background, and it's easy to sort of take them for granted, I think. Especially like living in a university town, it's easy to think like, oh yeah, the university. But like the university is full of hundreds of hardworking professors across, like, just down the street from it. There's like Research Park where there's companies that are pouring millions of dollars into the research, and like that research, obviously, as corporate entities, they have a selfish goal of wanting to do things, but it's a selfish goal of wanting to bring new technology to not just Guelph but the entire country that everyone's going to benefit from. Yeah, I think it's just we don't do enough to celebrate the ongoing hard work and the wins that so many people contribute to.
Absolutely. And so that's why this conversation is important, right? So the news is designed to keep you going back to see, was this resolved? What is the new thing, right? Even the music that's used in the news is to keep you kind of at a heightened sense.
Yeah.
You never go back to the news to say, hey, this thing has been solved,
Yeah.
right? So it's on to the next crisis, and it's designed that way. So I recommend, you can't have a steady 24-hour diet of the news because it's not designed to tell you what is going right.
Yeah.
And we need some balance, right? Acknowledge what's going right. There are a lot of companies in this city that are making huge progress on climate. So, PDI has solar on their roof. Denso is planning a solar field, and they do it because it's actually good for their bottom line, but they're also leading in the climate space, right?
Yeah.
The Cooperators has a net zero building. I think we should be celebrating all of these things. Of course, you point out if there's a massive polluter, but also to have these positive exemplars to give people hope that progress is being made, right? And if you look around the city, a lot of the city's green initiatives are funded by the federal government. And so electric buses and retrofitting buildings. So I think we need to be pointing those out while also showing what remains to be done.
Yeah.
Right? So we can maintain that tension in terms of progress and then improvement.
Yeah, it's like it's very much just like, if there's any kind of goal that you're striving towards in your personal life, you really have to maintain that balance of respecting and celebrating what you've accomplished, being proud of that, having the awareness of where you want to be, but just that right amount of balance of like what's my next North Star that I'm pointing towards, what are the things that are driving me. But if you can't really get swallowed up one way or the other, because if you're too much on the, like, we've already done so much, we can't afford to do anything else, and then the other thing is like there's so much left to be done, it's hopeless. And I think like a modern we talk about media literacy and things like that, but there's beyond just literacy. It's almost like making sure that you're consuming a balanced media diet that has a good balance of stories that are diving into something long term that maybe a journalist had to spend like several months doing. You still want to have a little bit of the keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening right now, because that can be important to stay informed. Yeah, just that real balance, because I think, like with food, it's easy to go overboard on one thing or the other, and then you find yourself nutritionally wanting in certain areas. And when that comes in the form of news, I think that's what leads to people feeling either hopeless or just disconnected from the entire system.
I think that we are in an environment where things are polarized and where we are looking at headlines as clickbait because all of the media has been monetized now. But the truth is, both those things are true at the same time. That's integrative thinking, right? We have made progress and there's more to do. Both these things are true, right? There is complexity in the issues that we're facing, and we need to acknowledge and embrace that rather than oversimplify things and lead people to believe that there are simple solutions.
Yeah.
If there were simple solutions, these things would be solved by now. So how are we making progress, right? And back to your point about the university, there's amazing progress being made in terms of, plastics at the University of Guelph and resilient, drought resilient seeds and crops and our food security. And I just encourage a curiosity about all kinds of things. So I say to people, so there's going to be a vacancy for my seat in Ward 6. No one is born knowing all about, transit or how the waste systems operate or municipal finance. But if you are curious about these things, it is really endlessly fascinating how a city runs. And if you are curious about that, you should think, and you want to serve your community, you should think about more public service.
Well, that's a good call to action. I don't want to say I'm sure someone's listening who that's calling to, but I'd hope that given the overall scope and point of this podcast, that there's some potential people out there that might be, even if not for this election, like for a future election. Do we know when that by-election will happen in Guelph to for your city council seat? Or is that something that happens? I'm sorry, I'm displaying a little bit my ignorance of city politics and how it actually works, but
No. So there's no problem at all. The city clerks have a couple of options that they're presenting to council.
okay.
If it were earlier in the term, they could go to the third person from the ballot, right?
Okay.
Which is an option. The other thing they can do is because there's only about a year and a bit left until the nominations open for the next election in October 2026, council could appoint someone. And so this happens frequently in municipalities. I think it would be tough for somebody to run in a full by-election and do the signs and all that stuff for 1 year of what is usually a 4-year term.
Right.
So that's a consideration. There is an expense. There's an expense to the city to run a full by-election. But that's an option, and council will decide whether that's what they want. So they can do go to the third person. They can appoint someone. They can do a by-election. I'm not sure if they have other options under the Municipal Act. But the reason that I timed my official resignation was so that the clerk's report would have the maximum amount of time sort of open to the public. So they have timing under the Municipal Act, which I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here, but the moment that they declare a seat vacant, they have to bring a report to the next council meeting. But if I announce my resignation just before a council meeting the next day, it doesn't give the clerks or the public the opportunity to see the report and to think about it, right? And then council would have to deliberate. So in consultation with the clerk's office, I chose a date that gave the maximum amount of transparency, the maximum amount of time for the public and for council to consider the report and the recommendations. And now it will be in council's hands.
I don't know if this is a sign of just me kind of getting older as politics becomes more interesting to me and more interwoven through my life, but I'm really finding myself really appreciating the fact that, Canada as an entire federal entity is, when you really get down to it, we're made up of a bunch of cities, and we're obviously not everything in Canada is a city, but I think when I was young, it's easy to sort of think like, well, okay, federal elections, that's the most important step. They, control the whole country. And then provincially, it's a little less important. It's just Ontario. And then municipal, like, okay, yeah, it's local stuff, but it's not as important. But that's a really short, narrow-minded view of things, because, like, the municipal is everything around you and everything that controls your life, and what is, like, it's almost like these things just kind of ladder up to each other, and to describe them in terms of importance, like provincially and municipally, like, that can have a huge impact on your life and how things go. And yeah, I don't know how we encourage that sort of civic mindedness with young people, but I do think Guelph is a good place to that already has that foundation of community mindedness, where people are excited and interested and invested in their cities, and they see the impact that it has.
I don't think there's any one level of government that's more important than another.
Yeah.
I think I know they have different jurisdictions. They have different roles to play. Definitely the municipal level of government is the closest to people. So, when you say what is most important, well, if somebody stopped picking up your waste, that would be rapidly very, very important.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And the municipal level is responsible for the majority of the delivery of service that you use every day. So
Yeah.
from clean water from your tap to flushing your toilet to walking on the sidewalk, to the streetlights that are working and controlling traffic, to police services, all that stuff's municipal. And one of my favorite things, I love having school groups into city council chambers and then explaining what the different levels of government do. It's the tour guide in me. I love that stuff. And people struggle because they say, well, everyone's finger pointing. But there are specific responsibilities attributable to the province, right?
Yep.
And those are provincial, and they are laid out in our constitution. And then there's the federal government responsibilities, things that are national in scope. Things that are national in scope, and one of the reasons I was attracted to run federally is that Guelph can have climate action in our city. We can ban plastic bags, and it will make a difference here, a small difference.
Yep.
But if you have legislation nationally to ban plastic bags, that makes a huge difference in terms of plastic production, what goes to landfill, and it avoids this patchwork. We have 444 municipalities in Ontario. So when there is either provincial or federal legislation, it is a lot simpler for businesses that operate in different jurisdictions, right? So the impact is greater. And so similarly, any sort of income redistribution. The municipal level of government only has property taxes, user fees, and grants from other levels of government. So it is the wrong place to be trying to redistribute income because your property taxes, as the main source of income for the city, those are agnostic to your household income,
Right.
right? But your income taxes are based on your income. So any big moves in terms of income supports, they have to come from the province or the federal government, right? So I think understanding who does what, and actually TVO has a really cute cartoony video, just Google it, called Who Does What, and it's very catchy. And it just lays it out pretty simply, who does what. And then there's shared areas of jurisdiction. And you're quite right. In Guelph, we have great collaboration between the MP, the MPP, and the mayor. And that will continue. And then great collaboration with a lot of community organizations as well.
It sort of speaks to the power and the importance of having strong local journalism and that. And I think that's, everyone, you're definitely aware of this, of how the rise of the internet, and we're kind of as a culture still in the very thick of processing how, like, what does media look like in this. It's almost even hard if there's young people that are listening, they've just grown up in this world, but things have changed so quickly and so rapidly, and all of the institutions that used to exist, like the newspapers and things like that, have just been gutted. I know I'm personally really interested to see the Liberals have made some promises with regards to investment in local journalism and things like that. With, there was a lot of debate about the CBC and things like that. But I think when you see the power of what getting local news to people and that information to people, it's so integral to having a cohesive society. And it's not good for the health of our democracy when everyone is, when I say everyone, when majority of people are only really aware of what's happening at the federal level, and from that they're only really aware of who's in the prime minister seat, right? And there's so much other things happening. Yeah, I'm interested to see what some of those maybe you know more a little bit about it. It's okay if you can't share or anything like that, but what that investment will look like on a local level.
So I know that there were, that it's included in the Liberal Party platform. And I really think that local journalism is very important.
Yeah.
And I think, so I did my master's degree at U of G in leadership, and my thesis was on trust between organizations. And I've been following trust in Canada for a very long time. We have to get back to a place where there are credible sources of information that are fact-based, where if somebody says something that is not factual, there's an editor who will correct it, where things are fact-checked, where people get fired if they don't follow journalistic standards.
Yeah.
We do have to get back to that place, especially, and this is referred to in the platform, especially in a crisis.
Yeah.
So especially for health research, especially in a moment of crisis, evacuations, for example, You need a credible local news source to turn to know what to do. And you can't expect it to be there if it's not been nurtured all along. So, good local journalism at the municipal level is really important, not just for transparency of City Hall, for example, but also for the promotion of all kinds of community events,
Yep.
right? Because that is the fabric of a community. So I really believe that local journalism is important. I commend our local journalists. We're actually pretty lucky in Guelph in terms of people who follow City Hall, who show up at events.
Mm-hmm.
And I think nationally we need that because we know there's a lot of disinformation. I
Yeah.
heard at many doors. I saw this on Facebook. Facebook that won't allow you to have actual accredited news organizations. And then people don't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah. And like the misinformation was bad enough before the recent-ish explosion of AI has just sort of opened a fire hose of credible looking, credible sounding profession, like, you know, whatever professional means to you, like professional looking things that can just be completely made up whole cloth. And you're right, like part of that media literacy is understanding where are you getting your news from? Who is this journalist? Can you trust them? Can you trust this publication? Are you just assuming that this publication that, you know, someone shares a link and you open it and it, you know, at first glance looks like news, and so many of these malicious organizations get by just tricking like what you expect something to look like. Same thing with like newspapers. You know, there's some malicious organizations that put out things that look like news, and for all intents and purposes they're trying to trick you into thinking like this is legitimate journalism, this is all on the level and you can just trust this. And they're tapping into, a lot of people just have that innate like trust of these institutions because they grew up in a society where there was a high trust for the printed word, because there was gatekeepers in place that protected what could you put out there in the printed word. And I think we're just in a precarious place that is going to take real effort by people, and it's the effort by people to individually educate themselves.
Well, yeah. So when I did my research on trust, it is a lot of work if you're going to be trying to validate the truthfulness of everything that you're reading, right? And so people use that shortcut of credentials
Yeah.
or of an organization that has an editor that, has when you need to know who's paying for this news source, right?
Yes.
You need to think about that. You need to see, is there a journalist's name there? And if there's something incorrect, is there a mechanism for me to contact, to have that corrected? I do think our news organizations, though, nationally in particular, need to do a lot fewer opinion pieces. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure 24-hour news is serving anybody. Because
Yeah.
back to your point about keeping people anxious, more after the, commercial, all that stuff, we are hearing the same ideas recycled nonstop, lots of speculation,
Yeah.
lots of breathless post announcement opinion that is often wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I would love to see them do more actual reporting. There should be a greater variety of stories that they are covering, and
Yeah.
I understand that costs money to send journalists out to do that investigative reporting. But I think we need a lot less opinion, because what it becomes is it becomes spin.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I've
that.
taught PR, so I know, I know what spin is. But there are some great Substacks. So it's not to say that independent journalists don't have really great insights, but I think again, it's about their credentials.
Yeah.
It's about accountability. It's about who's paying to put that out. And people do need to be critical thinkers. And I think there is a lot of room for misinformation and disinformation right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, you know, there's a lot of good journalists out there, and then there's a lot of journalists that you can tell that they're just digging for the soundbite, and they're digging to specifically rile up either opposing views on the other opposite side, or And then for some of it's like, well, some of it's just good necessary work, but it can be frustrating. Like I was recently, I think it was just yesterday, Prime Minister Carney was revealing his new cabinet, and then was taking questions, and some of the journalists just trying to like dig into specific. Like one of them was saying, like, "Oh, you described Donald Trump as a transformative president. Did you mean that in a good way or in a bad way?" And he kind of smiled, and it's like as a journalist, like you know that he's in a impossible to win position. If he talks badly about Trump, Trump could see that, and he has an ongoing relationship to maintain there. He obviously chose the word transformative for a very particular reason because you can kind of read into it either way. And I feel like, is it, are you really serving the public with that sort of journalism by just forcing him to sort of say like, hey, I said that for a reason, like read between the lines a little bit, but then I don't know. I just don't know if that's really productive or if it's just mining content to make people upset on social media, which yeah. Sorry, we've gone down this podcast is always made up of tangents, and I know your time is limited today, so I did want to jump into some other questions. So Lloyd Longfield served Guelph with dedication for several years. What qualities or achievements of his tenure do you admire and hope to uphold or build upon in your role as MP now?
So Lloyd was an excellent ambassador for Guelph
Mm-hmm.
and a real statesman. And I think that people want to see that tone in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
People, and one of the reasons I wanted to run is I'm very disturbed by just these nonstop attacks, disrespect of our institutions like the Prime Minister's office, like Parliament itself.
Yeah.
And Lloyd really served with distinction. And we saw that when he announced that he wasn't going to run again, the comments from other parliamentarians, people I've met since who have commented on what an exemplary parliamentarian that Lloyd was, and that includes work on committees. So we don't see a lot of the work that happens on committees,
Mm-hmm.
but Lloyd was on the Environment Committee, brought forward a number of amendments to make legislation better. So there are ways that Lloyd served this community that most people will never really be aware of. The other piece is he was a tireless advocate for a lot of the organizations, for the university, as we discussed earlier. So, over the course of his representation, he brought in upwards of $400 million to the university, to nonprofits, to the city. And that's everything from infrastructure works to $13.5 million for clean energy at the new library,
Mm-hmm.
to $170 million from the federal government for Linamar to convert to EV technology. So a lot of things. I think it's $16 million at the university for an agri-food, agribusiness platform. A just extraordinary amount of work in terms of delivering very tangible things for the city, the university, and the community. So I absolutely am hoping to do that, especially as we enter this moment that might be precarious.
Yeah. And I guess to keep kind of going with talking about other individuals in the political sphere. So you recently won the campaign, but to talk about your competitors in that campaign. So campaigns often bring together individuals with diverse perspectives. Were there any qualities or ideas from your election competitors that you found particularly inspiring or that challenged you to think differently, or qualities that you admire in them that you hope to bring to Ottawa?
I think everyone who runs, first of all, believes in democracy,
Mm-hmm.
and that is commendable. I think everybody wants to have a conversation about how to serve Guelph
Yeah.
and to make it a better place and to make every individual's experience better. We agree on the most pressing issues and the need to work across party lines. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that is that's true across the board.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the approaches, I don't think so, because no one party has a monopoly on any particular issue.
Yeah.
And so, the Liberal Party has a great record on climate and will continue with bold climate action. So I think we'll continue to collaborate with those folks. And where we have heard concerns in people's driveways. So I'm more interested in what I heard from people at the door
Yeah, that's fair.
I think that drives me more.
Yeah. And I think I guess as a politician, it's important to keep the consideration of other viewpoints, but you also have to maintain your own personal like ideals, right? In terms of knowing who you are and who you're not.
The piece I'd add also, so I did a number of business roundtables, three of them. I had a roundtable with a lot of nonprofit leaders and to hear what their hopes and concerns are. And they don't always, it's not a big love in. People want to see simpler government programs.
Yeah.
They want it to be easier for small business to grow. The nonprofits want to know they're going to be supported going forward.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things, I think, are important for me to keep in mind.
Yeah.
More so than other parties' platforms.
Yeah.
And on council, my motto was always, because you get emails that are people are very angry or upset. I always went with the mantra: just because you're mad doesn't make you wrong. And as long as people were being civil, then we could get to a place and I can help them, right?
Yeah.
Or understand their issue, or point them in the right direction, or right. It's about service that way.
Yeah. And I like what you said there, like as long as you're being civil and you know, you sort of alluded to this before, but there's sentiments that can be frustrating to see from opposing views where it doesn't feel like there's room for civility in conversations when, you know, someone has a big like F Trudeau or F Carney sticker on the back of their truck where it's like that kind of sounds like a non-starter conversation wise. Like is that doesn't sound like someone who's open to hearing opposing views. It's very seems like it's a bit of a toxic mentality to put out there, but
We
I don't know if
need
we're speaking to those people on this podcast necessarily, but maybe
we need
yeah.
to understand what's behind that, though. We
Yeah,
need to understand what is the frustration that's driving that,
right.
and you need to meet you need to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, you need to start with a civil discourse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't hear you if you're yelling at me,
Yeah.
right? That's not constructive. But if you want me to hear what you're saying, then I can hear you out.
Mm-hmm.
But we do need to be hearing about what are the frustrations in the West.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that we have an opportunity to revitalize the Canadian Federation.
Mm-hmm.
We are a confederation of regions. I am very excited actually at the prospect of reducing interprovincial trade barriers, at having this conversation of a more united Canada. It's time to renew that. We need to understand what is driving some of the frustration and address legitimate grievances.
Yeah. It is a probably unintended side effect, like obviously unintended on Trump's part, but imposing these like tariffs, it's forcing Canada to kind of take a step back and say like, okay, wait a second, like it's easy for us to get so focused on the disagreements between provinces and like you know the sometimes positive, sometimes negative conversation, the push and pull. But when you get such a negative force from the outside, and then it, you know, like you said, it forces us to sort of say, like, okay, wait a second, like, we need to look at what makes us strong and what unites us and how we can work together. Because what unites us and what brings us together is, I think, more powerful and stronger than, I mean, I don't know, as Carney has said many times, that we can give ourselves more than what the Americans can take away from us. And I think that's a really powerful sentiment of hope to kind of lead us forward.
It changes our view also. So if you were looking to the States, and let's acknowledge it's a market that's 10 times the size of Canada's.
Mm-hmm.
But if our view was very north south and we're now forced to be looking east west,
Yeah.
right? Then we are looking at, okay, how can we make this part work so that we're a lot stronger? And I think that will spark some productivity and innovation that is needed in Canada. We've had a productivity challenge. Well, I have an economics degree, and we were talking about this more than 30 years ago. So, how do we accelerate some of this stuff? How do we retain our entrepreneurs? How do we fuel startups, right? All of these things. And I got to say, Boundless Accelerator here in Guelph and the Business Center, they are trying to do that. How do we support entrepreneurs and spin offs and businesses for innovation and growth? That's exciting. And it's exciting to be having that conversation. And then, how are we looking towards other markets? But I think the turning to one another is very important.
Yeah. Well, I guess to wrap up our conversation here, looking ahead, what are your primary goals for your term as an MP? And during that term, how do you hope to see Guelph evolve? And maybe it's a little early to talk legacy, but what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
It's probably, I'm not sworn in yet, so it's a little early to talk
Yeah.
about legacy. But absolutely the priority in this moment with Trump and tariff threats, it is local jobs, it is local economy,
Yeah.
securing the jobs here, continuing to attract, grow, retain other businesses, diversifying our economy here in Guelph. So I'm a big proponent of local economic development. So that's number one. Number two, I mean, obviously the sovereignty question's wrapped up in that. Number two is the housing file, definitely. So I'm very familiar with the housing file. And we need the public sector on that, right? The city
Yeah.
doesn't build housing, but we need some real progress there. And the affordability issue. So the one thing that I can help drive, we've already seen with childcare, the cost of childcare in the city, if you have a regulated space, has gone from $35 a day to $22 a day. That's progress. That's real affordability for more than 2,000 families.
Yeah.
And if you've got two kids, then that's even more savings. We need to continue to drive that down to $10 a day for a lot of reasons, productivity being one. And lots of good outcomes for early childhood education as well. So those are things that I want to work on. There's we have to do our committee selection. I mentioned Lloyd was on the Environment Committee and Science and Research. I'm very interested. There's one called, and stay tuned because I don't know if we get it. Everybody gets to choose four, and you'll get two of the four. But there's a committee called Transportation, Infrastructure, and Communities. So that's my number one pick because it's just a great fit with my council background. And then I'd love to serve on any of industry or environment or agriculture. My legacy broadly will be to help Guelph enhance its national reputation and international reputation and help Guelph continue to punch above its weight.
I think that's a very admirable goal, and I'm sure. I shouldn't say sure. I hope a lot of the city is behind you in those goals. And if someone's listening wants to, be able to keep tabs on you and how you do, where would you point people to stay up to date on all of your efforts in Parliament?
So for now, it's social media, and in a week or two, there'll be an office with a phone number and an email. So right now, O'Rourke for Guelph on all your usual social media places, and as soon as we have an office nailed down and those coordinates, then we will share those broadly as well.
Perfect. Well, Dominique, thanks so much for joining me today and for sharing all of this with our audience. Wishing you the best of luck in the days to come, and hope you settle into the new role. It seems like you've been confident and successful in a lot of your current roles and what you've done so far, and I think you're going to do great things in Ottawa. And thanks so much for joining me, and hope you're able to achieve everything that you'd like to.
Thank you. I mean, I hope this is the first of many conversations.
Yeah, same here. I was going to say it would be great to have you back on, and
Sure.
after an appropriate amount of time has passed, and you can sort of
Give you an update.
yeah.
And we're talking about all these things we're talking about higher education, innovation, community vitality, democracy, journalism. You're contributing to all these things. These conversations contribute to good social fabric, solid democracy. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Growing Guelph. I've been your host, Jordan Sloggett. Be sure to subscribe to us on social media, on your favorite podcast app, and if you have a recommendation for a future guest you'd like me to speak to, you can reach out to me at growingguelph@gmail.com.